All right, everybody, welcome to Coffee for Closers. Alex Wellings here on our new set, which is very interesting, Jacob. I think this is, it's not the Coffee for Closers set,
It's very
but
clean.
this is one of the new sets for all the other filming that we do. And so, anyway, we wanted to try it out today. Figured it might be a little change of pace, but more or less, we just wanted to try the lighting out a little bit. Not bad. Does it look good on camera, Jacob?
Looks good. I need a little more time with it, but looks good.
So last episode, we were talking a little bit about presentations in the semi-virtual world. We were just kind of talking about how that semi-virtual model is opening up people's prospecting pool. But then, we've spent a lot of time with the new autopilot program, launching this new artificial workshop system. It seems to, in large part be doing very, very well across the country. But the one thing I really felt was necessary for us to talk about was the fact that when, we're doing all this filming, a ton of filming with advisors, and they're coming into the office filming presentations. And we've had a lot of opportunities to see folks that were very well prepared and folks that were not prepared as well, people that have been doing presentations forever, know and are very intimate with their slides. And then that coupled with just tons of years of experience watching advisors give presentations and giving presentations of my own, I feel like there's some key factors to doing a good presentation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That anybody can harvest. Like the keys are not just like, oh, you're a great speaker and that's what makes you good at giving presentations. I think what it comes down to is I feel like there are a lot of folks out there that take a slide deck from somebody else and then never make it their own.
Yeah.
And so they, as somebody that builds their own slide decks, like I want to build my own presentation, even if I'm taking ideas from other presenters on how they approach a certain topic. I still want to build the slide deck A to Z myself, so that you get when the values of doing that. And I realize that not everybody can build a slide deck, a PowerPoint potentially, or wherever you're using for your slide builder of choice, whether it be PowerPoint, Keynote, Canva, whatever it might be. I find that people generally, when they build them slides themselves, become masters of transitioning or why this slide needs to come before this slide. Their slides also become a little less wordy because they built it. They know what they're supposed to say on this slide. Therefore, the slide's more visual representation of the concept they're talking about rather than the words. And I find folks that have a canned presentation that they've taken from someone else and never really adapted to their specifics or never sat down and touched up or what have you, don't have those transitions nailed down. And that comes across almost better in person. You get away with it more in person, maybe is the right thing to say, than you do when you're online in like a virtual setting. So a lot of the filming, it's like there's so much crowd interaction in a presentation. There's so much that you can do to bring somebody else to talk to in a live presentation. So, if I'm not sure on my transition, I might ask like, oh, so are there any questions out there right now? Anybody have any questions? Okay, moving on. Not a big deal. And then I can move to my next slide. But in the virtual world, it's like you gotta put on a show. It needs to be rehearsed second to second to second. Like every transition counts. And so if you don't know your slides, what's coming next, and how you're supposed to build on the slide to the reason of the next, like this, and this brings us to our next point, folks. This thing. And this thing is so important because of this thing. And this thing is so important because problem A. And problem A becomes a problem because problem B and problem C. And, it's like, and every slide's transition is part of a long story. And if you don't build the presentation yourself, I feel like you miss that out. You're not telling a story. You're just making points.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I agree. But also on the flip side of things, I think like in person, people can get away with a lot, like you're kind of saying. And I think that people can still do that on camera. They just think that they have to be overly polished.
Oh, you think it's almost the opposite? Like
Well-
it's because they're not giving in to the imperfection.
Yes and no. So I've definitely, I mean, we've both seen people who have not really known their slides, right? And I
Yeah.
definitely think there's no fix to that, not knowing your slides. But if you get caught up, there's people that almost like panic if they
Yeah.
kind of forget their next slide for a second. Whereas in a natural presentation, I feel like they just take a minute to look at the slide and just continue on.
The silence is deafening for sure, and it makes them nervous.
Panic when they're on camera.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. I feel, yeah. But with coaching, that can be solved for.
Yeah.
Like a good producer behind the scenes can help them realize, hey, it's not the biggest deal in the world if you're taking a second to gather your thoughts on where you're at.
But I'm not saying like any excuse for not knowing your slides.
Yeah, you have to know your
You
slides.
definitely have to do that. I agree 100% there.
And I do think, in a good live online presentation, you are opening it up to discussion which throws curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like a lot of the presentations I see out there are aimless. They're like all over the place. Like I've seen Social Security presentations where guys are just throwing the facts at people.
Charts with thousands of numbers on them.
Charts with thousands of numbers, or they're making the major hitting points of Social Security. Is like, oh, here's what Social Security at 62 means. Will it be there for me? Here's the history. What are the benefits of going early versus going late? What are the benefits of going or the tax benefits of Social Security? And all of this can be solved by a benefit analysis. You should get one.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be like the major hitting point of most Social Security presentations that exist. And it's a huge problem. Like a way better way to do this is to tell a story through those things. It's like, can you tell a story that talks about why Social Security was originally created, that resonates with the majority of folks, that talks about the tax implications, that talks about the benefits of going early or going later? Like that's what the creative part of it should be, is how do I tell all the major hitting points in a story and let me tell you a tale.
Yeah. It's
The Power of Storytelling. It's a very popular book out there. I've been to a number of conventions where the guy who wrote The Power of Storytelling has gone and spoken, and it is so true. And I think a lot of folks try to do that, but they don't try to make their presentations perfect. They don't also recognize, here's another thing about presentations. They don't also recognize the benefit of updating.
Mm-hmm.
Like I find a really good positive outcome come from when I update slides or update a presentation. Don't necessarily change the material.
You're just saying change the look of the slides.
No.
Or
maybe the story gets changed a bit.
Okay.
But I'm still hitting the major bullet points.
Yeah. So the content stays the same.
Right. Content kind of stays the same, but the story changes to, it's like, for instance, potentially I change it from just being about Social Security here's the general overview of how Social Security is. I change a presentation about Social Security and talk about Social Security claiming at age 62.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, well, now I'm really super specific. I changed from going an overview of Social Security type presentation to just talking about one instance, the benefits of going at 62, the benefits and downsides of going at 62. And I tell that tale. And people were like, oh, no, that's too segmented. Now you're only talking to people that want to claim at 62. It's like, no, not necessarily, because I can still tell the same tale about the benefits of going later, the history of why Social Security was created, but I can also micro in on what I know to be one of the major thoughts of anybody about to claim Social Security. Should I go at 62? I mean, there was probably a lot of people that want full retirement age, but they in their thoughts of their minds, like, is there a benefit of going early? As I tell that tale, and I think a lot of folks are like watching at Social Security. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of benefits to waiting, but what if you didn't? Like, how could I make it work if you went at 62? Well, one of the major downsides of going at 62 is X. This is how you solve for X. This is what we need to do to solve for X in a particular situation like this or like this. It's like, what if you're a high income person claiming at 62? It's like you can change the story and still have a compelling way to cover all the major hitting points of Social Security, but it makes it fresh for me and exciting. And so if I've told the same story a billion times over and I'm bored of giving it, find a way to deliver the same information in a new and exciting way. And I feel like the passion, the energy comes back. I feel excited to give the presentation. And, as watching this is like, it's about excitement as much as it's about the content.
Yeah.
Like, is the speaker passionate about this thing? That delivers a good presentation when they are.
Well, also, you're saying about, like, for example, the 62 question. You're not talking about people who might go wait until full retirement age. I think a lot of people are too hung up on trying to answer every single question there is out there.
It's such a good point.
And I think there's a big problem with that for a couple of reasons. One of which, most of the time, obviously most of the time anyone's doing a virtual presentation, a workshop, their whole point is to get them to book with you, right?
Yeah.
If you answer all their questions, what reason do they have to book with you? One. But two, if you're, let's say you got 100 people in the room and 80 of those people have the same question. If you go off trying to answer just 20 of those people's questions, you're going to lose the crowd trying to answer a minuscule question for, people.
It's another thing. Yeah. What you were saying before that with like trying to make all the points to make sure your audience knows that you know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you potentially you're almost hitting on something that I feel very passionate about in presenting is what's the best cliffhanger that I can leave them on?
Yeah.
Like, where's the best place that I can leave this presentation? How do I end it to where it's like, oh my God, I got to know the answer.
That's the thing with like a lot of things is people want to be left on cliffhangers when it comes to movies, stories, anything. There's some value behind like cliffhangers like that.
It does seem like the best it does seem like the best movies will end you with like this kind of thought-provoking
An unanswered question.
And Simon Sinek start with why. Start with the end in mind. I feel like that's a really good way to presentation building is like, what do I want them to think about? What is like the big question that I feel like they should be concerned about with their retirement as a retirement planner? Like, what do I feel like most people should be worried about? And how do I build to this point and build and build and build and build and say, that's why you have to come see us.
Fortune, who we've had on the show before, he says something that I love. He said, 4 stages of learning. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There's the consciously or unconsciously incompetent. So you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think the key is to get people consciously incompetent.
Yeah.
So get them understanding that they really don't know.
Yeah.
So then they're going to want to book an appointment so they can come consciously competent after they book an appointment with you.
Right. Like we're going to get you to the end goal of you understanding your problem and understanding how you're going to solve it.
But if you get them consciously competent in your presentation, what's the point of them getting an appointment with you?
Right. Yeah. You can't teach them everything. I do think that we err on that side of like, it depends. Like the real answer is going to be that it depends on your particular situation. But if you've armed them, disturb and disrupt is another thing. It's like you've got to disturb and disrupt them to a degree. We don't want to be fear-mongering, but we do want to be, letting them know the weight of the decisions that are going to be made about your retirement. And I feel like Well, I don't want to get beyond the actual point of today's discussion. The presentation should build to the most momentous point you can be possibly making about your practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is why I started out doing this. And this is why I've dedicated my life to helping people like you in this particular situation. Because as you can tell from what we're talking about, the gravity of this is hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And for some, that's everything. For others, it's just a lot of money. But either way, it could have been solved for with just a couple hours of good planning during this perfect time of our lives, which happens to be right at the end of our career, this incubation period. It's like, wow, that's powerful. You're just telling me, like, right then, it's like, this is why I've dedicated my life to this moment for my clients. I land planes for a living, David Connor says. A lot of people out there are pretty good at the taking off and the flying part. The landing is where majority of issues can happen. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. There's all kinds of people that come into our office that are engineers, doctors, lawyers. There's all kinds of people that have specialized in things, and they chose to specialize in those things, and they're probably very good at that thing. What I've chosen to be an expert at is retirement planning. And it just happens to be that if you take a few hours of time to really analyze, like if you're at my level, my skill level, whatever, me being the advisor,
Mm-hmm.
you could spend a few hours with somebody's finances and understand the best way for them to potentially position assets to make sure that they have the retirement of their dreams. And if you don't take that time, those few hours in that 55 to 65-year-old range and get the right pieces in place, you potentially leave hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table carelessly. And it does. I mean, it's a nitty-gritty conversation. But again, the presentation builds to that point of like, how do I get them to recognize the momentous nature of doing this with the right person at the right time? Pretty cool. I just feel like not enough people want to do that. They almost feel like, maybe you got somebody in your office that already does like presentations and is really good at it, and that's their thing. But I do feel like there's a lot of people that want to be great at presentations and are fine with just kind of grabbing any old presentation and not spending the time to get intimate with the slides and really understand either the story that's been told by somebody else and so you can make it your own, or to design something of your own and build it just from scratch. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's something that we've done a lot of times for our producers, is to build them a nice template of a presentation, get an idea of what they want to talk about, and build something spectacular for them and allow them to kind of get intimate with it. But others, they've had a presentation for a long time, and I'm just shocked that they haven't gotten that intimate with it just yet. So, food for thought. And a good conversation. I just feel like you'll see your prospecting, your ROI on these marketing events that people do go through the roof when you really give a killer presentation. Anyway, that's it. I mean, that's all we wanted to chat with, at least on this episode of Coffee for Closers. We appreciate everybody watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, please, please, please give us a thumbs up. It always helps. Give us a like. Or if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It certainly is. We feel like great stuff here. We're always pumping something out at least a few times a week. So anyway, enjoy. We'll see you guys next time right here on Coffee for Closers. Take care.